The True Craft Podcast is back. After a short break, we decided it was time to fire the conversation back up. Join me, Chris Farmand, and my magnificent co-host, Katy Noel, as we bring you honest conversations from the source. We will address the most prevalent topics in craft today while honoring the past and being mindful of what the future holds. So sit back and enjoy the True Craft Podcast. Available on your favorite podcast player. Katy, what's up?
Hey, Chris.
Are you as excited as I am to launch the True Craft Podcast for a second time?
If anything, I'm more excited.
More excited? That is great. To all the listeners, I wanted to record a quick trailer of what we have in store coming up for the relaunch of the True Craft Podcast. But before we get into that, let me introduce to you our magnificent new co-host of the show, Katy Noel.
Hi.
Katy, give us a 20-second background of your introduction or background of yourself.
Oh my. Okay. I was born and raised in Eugene, Oregon. I graduated with my degree in interpersonal communication, and I have found myself as the brand associate here at Small Batch Standard, and I get to work with cool people every day.
Amazing elevator pitch. That was perfect. And so why I think this season is going to be unique, or why I think this relaunch is going to be unique and successful, is because we're going to be talking with my institutional knowledge, but you bring a look and a feel and a curiosity and a distance from the craft brewing industry that is just going to really enhance the conversation. So that's why I'm excited to introduce you as the co-host. And yeah, we're gonna go from there.
I'm looking forward to it, Chris. So can you tell me how this season will be different than previous seasons?
Yeah, we're gonna keep it simple. It's gonna be very, very simple. It's gonna be you and I and a guest, and we're going to have honest conversations about topics that are currently hot, cold, prevalent in the craft industry. So we are going to come up with questions, and we're going to interview guests who are really going to add a lot of value to the
conversation.
Yeah. So the ways in which this launch is going to be different than our original is we're just going to simplify it. Okay. It's going to be me, you, it's going to be a guest. We're going to push past all the history, right? We know how most breweries were started. So as a listener, if you hear us talk to the guest and they say the words same, they had a very similar story to how they started up. We're not interested in their story. We're interested in what's currently on their mind, what's plaguing them, how they're winning. How are they winning in their market, either through retail or wholesale or what have you be. So that's how it's going to be different. We're going to go straight to the issues, straight to the wins, and we're going to uncover them and just have an honest conversation about it.
What are you most excited for about this season, Chris?
Oh, I'm excited to revisit the conversation with some guests that we had from the original launch of the podcast. And I'm really excited to talk to all the new guests. We have tons of new guests that are interested in being on the show. And I think we've laid out some topics that could be controversial, could certainly be helpful to all the listeners. And I'm really excited to get that information out.
I'm excited to learn.
Awesome. So let's do it.
Let's do it.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the True Craft Podcast. Today's guest is Bill Tressler, CEO and co-founder of Hinterland Brewery in the one and only Green Bay, Wisconsin. Welcome, Bill.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're able to join us today, because I know the listeners are going to get a totally different perspective than the majority of our young whippersnapper. Not that you're not young, Bill. You are so young and you are so active, and I know all about your hobbies. However, you've been doing this for a minute. I'm pumped to say you've been doing this for nearly 3 decades, and you have so much knowledge and so much history to bring to the conversation, especially now. I mean, wouldn't you say that we're kind of at an inflection point with craft beer, and where do owners go?
Yeah, it really feels like that. I mean, things are definitely changing. We've seen a couple of periods like this throughout our history, but this one seems a little deeper and maybe even a little darker than we've seen in times before. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I don't think that you have the same situation that most breweries do, how you got started. Can you give us a Cliff Notes version on how you and Michelle got this thing going?
Yeah, I mean, I was really, it kind of grew out of, yeah, obviously like everybody, I was a home brewer, right? But at the same time, I was a journalist and I was working for the San Francisco Chronicle. The paper went on strike and I needed a job. And I was just starting my career. This is back in like 93, 94. And I wound up taking a job as the editor of a beer magazine called Beer the Magazine and American Brew Magazine, actually 2 magazines. And I ended up realizing I didn't know a lot about commercial brewing. So I enrolled in UC Davis's University Extension program to learn more about brewing science and fermentation, and ended up doing that. Dove into that, took a lot of classes there, and then Dr. Lewis at the time had started a new school called the American Brewers Guild. I enrolled in his school and did a brewing science and engineering program. And then once I finished, I was kind of at that point where I felt like I wanted to start my own brewery. So we moved back to Green Bay from the Bay Area, and started this tiny little brewery, just Michelle and I. And it was a little 7-barrel system, out in the countryside in an old cheese factory, and sort of just, that was the our origin story. So grew it from there.
So you got to experience the 1999, 2000, and because I would say 93 to 99, there was a bit of a ramp up, right, of craft breweries, kind of a movement.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so explain, you lived through 99. Tell us what happened.
It was actually an interesting period in time, because back then when we first got started, we're competing with not anywhere near the number of breweries, but there were some really good breweries in Wisconsin. There was breweries like New Glarus and Lakefront and a few others, and it really became this this challenge to meet or to be at like $4.99 on the shelf for a 6-pack of beer. So it was like $4.99 to $5.99, which we just couldn't do it. We couldn't make those, make beer and sell it at that price point. And
when you say you talking about all of craft?
Well, it was all the craft, right? And it sunk a lot of breweries. But at the same time, we ended up we went draft only for a period of time, which we had a pretty big bottling operation, and we just kind of said, you know what, we're going to take a pause on bottling. And we went draft only, and we focused on our pub, because we had just built renovated an old building downtown and built a pub. And and it was kind of one of those things where we knew we had to wait until people were willing to pay more for beer. And I specifically remember New Glarus at one point in time, maybe it was like a year or two after that, like 2001, 2002, something like that. They came out with a price hike, and they were going out at $7.99. And
Wow.
and I looked at it and I said, I think we can make that work. And so that's when we decided to jump back into the bottling game. We actually contract bottled for a bit, which was a kind of a disaster, but it got us back in the ring. And then we put in another packaging line, an updated packaging line into the brewery, and began bottling again. But it was a weird point, man. It was survival, right? Like you just had to, I felt like you had to let your business evolve into what it needed to be at that point in time. And just do what it took to stay in business. And we had just opened in 2000, we had just opened this new pub that was really, it was kind of a wild idea. It was a restaurant that was focused on very high-end food, right? And we were flying fish from Seattle and Hawaii and all over the place.
Green Bay, Wisconsin.
And people thought we were crazy, right? Like, but we wanted to be something different. We didn't want to just be another brew pub that served shepherd's pie. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I felt like we had to express ourselves in a way, and we had luckily landed this really good chef who was also a Green Bay native, and he said, "I'll come back to Green Bay, but these are the conditions. I got to have this, this, and this." And so I went out on this mission to figure out how to bring in fresh fish from the West Coast. And it was kind of comical. I talked to these people at Delta Airlines in Green Bay to bring these boxes of fish like every day in the like luggage of the planes. And a couple times they would explode and there was fish juice everywhere. Anyway, it was a long story, but it was we were just doing what we had to do. But in that period we built a really successful restaurant, and that was what was really giving us cash to keep our brewery going.
So the fine dining, the high end dining was in demand. The pairing it with the beer was still really new, and
yeah, absolutely. In fact, people would be like, there was a lot of people coming in, wanting wine, and we started to sell, some nicer wines and things like that because we were able to do it. But we were really like pushing people to try good food with beer, and so we set our our restaurant was sort of, they didn't call it this back then, but it was farm to table, so to speak, and we were bringing in a lot of wild game and a lot of fresh fish, and we were taking beer, a lot of styles of beer that nobody had really any experience with in Green Bay, and saying you should eat this with this, and it worked. It was sort of something that people hadn't seen before in Green Bay. Coming back from San Francisco, there was a good amount of it being done in that area, but in Green Bay, Wisconsin, there was nothing. So it worked out to our advantage.
That's awesome. Are there any similarities between 2023 and 1999 when it comes to the craft beer scene that you experienced?
Well, I think that there is, one thing that we saw is a lot of breweries just closed up shop. There was a lot of equipment on the market. There was a lot of auctions. There was a lot of people that got into the beer business prior to that were kind of looking for quick cash. I don't know if that's so much the scenario now, but people weren't well financed, and they just kind of got into it because it was their dream, and they realized how tough the business was, and they were like, all right, I've had enough of this, so they closed up shop.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of things to making a business last that stand the test of time, so to speak. And good finance is one of them. You always have to have that. You have to have enough cash on hand that you can survive the highs and lows. But I think what we're seeing now is a lot of just there's just so much in the market, and how do people choose? How do they understand what they're buying? Every day people are inundated with new styles
Yeah.
of beer and stuff. And there was a little bit of that then, but it was to a lesser extent. Now it's just a lot more of a convergence of product in the market. So
it's crazy how you're describing that time period and what I've witnessed over the past decade and what you've witnessed over the past decade. It literally mirrors each other.
Yeah.
It mirrors each other. So I don't know if we can make some sort of conclusion here that says, really, this is another cycle. And the breweries that are well capitalized, that have a good business plan, that have good finance, that have solid liquid, potentially have solid food, are just going to push right through. It may be painful, it may not be painful, but they'll make it to the other side. And the ones that aren't, they can just go ahead and exit now because it's going to happen inevitably.
I used to follow this. There was an analyst from Anheuser-Busch that I used to follow in the early days because there was very little information on craft, and this guy, like he could almost predict the future. You know what I mean? And it was wild because he said there would be this big high, and then it's going to be followed by a 14-month low and whatever. And I used to read his columns and basically we would really tighten our belt based on that information. And I think that it's true today. I don't think he's with us any longer, but anytime you hear of headwinds coming,
Mm-hmm.
it's there's probably a good reason for it, right? And the economy has been interesting to watch, and you can almost feel it. You can see it on people's faces when they come through the doors, and when there's times of austerity, coming. And I think we've been through that the last 6 to 9 months, maybe a year, whatever. Like just people wondering where are things headed, and
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go out on a limb here, though, and say there's one glaring difference, though, between today and 20 years ago. And I think that glaring difference happens to be from certainly the marketing, certainly the choices that are out there, right? And when I say choices, I'm talking about like beverage choices, not just craft beer choices. Yes, there's tons of craft beer, but craft beer drinkers have just so many beverage choices now.
They do.
Yep.
I would also add to that craft beer at that point in time had 0% market share. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's kind of a big difference. People are used to choosing craft beer at this point, but like you said, there's so much out there now. Every crazy style of beer. Plus, we've also dipped our toe into the seltzer world. We've dipped our toe into the RTD world. And it's really like the generation that's coming now is sort of used to having unlimited choices. You walk
Right.
into a convenience store and there's 100 flavors of Gatorade that they grew up with, as well as in our generation it was like Coca-Cola or Pepsi, right? Like so. People were used to just limited amounts of flavors. Now everybody wants unlimited flavors, and it's really hard to discern which ones are going to last and which ones aren't.
Yeah. That's a huge point. And really to add to that, there's so many choices, and it's just in your face all the time. It's on your face on the phone, it's on TV, it's in print, it's just everywhere. You're just constantly being reminded of, which I don't know how craft takes a page out of that playbook to just remember that you've got to continue to promote, regardless of how long you've been there or how old your product is or how solidified your brand is. Like the big boys are solidified, but they continue to put it in your face every single day. So, glooming question for me, what keeps you coming back every day? You've been doing this for a while. You've seen so many trend changes, style changes? Like, what keeps you coming back to this?
For me, it's always been every morning when I walk through the door, there's a chance to create something new, and it's that creativity. It's the idea that we're making something, and that we can enjoy it relatively soon after we create it. So that's a huge piece of it. The other thing is it's the people part of the business. The employees I work with every day, the customers that come through the door, the the distributor partners that I work with out in the field.
Mhm.
Over 28 years, I've built a lot of really great relationships, and I love that. And I think if I were ever to exit the business, I would miss it terribly, because those bonds run deep, and it's still super fun to me. It's still amazing to come in and see my team and say, what's everybody excited about? What should we be doing? You know what I mean? And even when times are tough, like, and we have to like tighten the belt a bit, and it's still like, hey, we got this. We can power through this. We can make it. We all know what to do. We've been there before, and we all know what that looks like, and we get through it together. I mean, COVID was one of those periods where we're like, holy shit, what just happened? You know what I mean? And we knew we had to make it through, and we did everything we could do to make that work. And so I love the idea of coming through the doors every morning, and finding that team, and working with everybody to make it all happen.
Yeah. I believe you have such a competitive advantage, just understanding that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. You've seen this before, and probably a couple different iterations. I keep talking about 1999, but there was certainly others that have happened.
Yeah,
If I was
2008 was another really interesting time, right?
when
2008, when we had the big stock market crash, and that was a wild time too.
Yeah. So I would say, as of today, we have not experienced a recession like we did in 2008. Thank God. Like, thank whatever you believe in, because everyone was bracing for another major recession, but I don't think it's actually happened. I think the Feds did an amazing job of really landing this runaway this runaway freight train, right? Airliner, that had just spurred so much spending and so much debt accumulation. But yes, 2008 was very scary.
Yeah,
it was a very, very scary time for many industries. I know that if I was a brewer in Wisconsin, I'd be knocking on your door and I'd be saying, hey, I got these are my fears, and these are my concerns, and these are my wins, and help me get through these, right? Help me get through these, just given your experience. So any breweries, I don't know if I'm putting you out there, but if I was a brewery in Wisconsin, if I was a brewery anywhere, I'd be reaching out to you. But certainly if I was in your backyard, I'd be knocking on your door.
I think it's an interesting, it's an interesting time. I don't know that that we've had that much. I mean, we do have like really great relationships with other breweries in the state, and certainly people, we all talk and whatever. But I was recently at a talk with that Russ Klisch from Lakefront gave, and someone in the group or in the audience like raised their hand and said, "How have you been able to make it?" I think they're 35 years or something like that now, And his answer to it was good finance. Is that's how we made it. You know what I mean? And he was one of those ones who's seen even more than I have. Russ is really smart in business, and he always knows when. I mean, let's face it, a lot of people get over their skis. They build huge plants, they overspend, they, you know what I mean, like all of this stuff, and we've all seen what that looks like. But Russ is very smart in how he's managed that business, and how he knows when it's the right time to pull the trigger on something, and when it's the wrong time, and when to just hold tight.
How big is Lakefront? I've heard of them. I don't know their size or story.
They're big. I mean, they're 50,000 plus barrels, I think.
Got it. Okay. Big, great. So describe to the listener your current setup now. Describe your current setup, your pub, your manufacturing setup, so on and so forth.
So we have a 24,000 square foot facility. Half of it is restaurant, half of it is brewery. We seat like 300 people in our pub. We have an extra 200 seats outside. And you know, the restaurant is a massive part of what we do. It's a huge tourist destination. We're located right next to the Lambeau Field. We anchor the Packers Titletown district. So you know, you could walk out our door and pick up a rock and throw it and hit the stadium. We're that close, right? We see about 25,000 customers through our doors every month. So the restaurant's an animal, you know. The brewery, you know, the highest production we've ever done in a year is a little over 8,000 barrels. You know, we are probably somewhere half of that today. We last year we produced 6,000 barrels. You know, this year's a little interesting. We're kind of waiting to see where it ends out, but you know, it's coming out of COVID. We put together a pretty awesome sales team to get back out there and win back business, and you know that helped a ton. But there's definitely headwinds in the market today, so you know we're insulated in a way because we have such a strong on-premise business here that you know we're kind of in that mode right now of just right sizing everything and making sure that that you know we don't get over our skis in terms of labor and production and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? Like everything that you're reading in the industry right now is talking about, like to quote Tommy Arthur, growing down, right? And being sure that everything is working as it should, but at the same time recognizing that there are, you know, craft is in a tough spot right now.
Right. Definitely. And are you? So you use the term growing down, you use the term right size. I think a lot of breweries are not okay with being okay. They're uncomfortable with possibly the path that the business is taking them that they didn't intend to set on. Are you comfortable with the path that you're on right now?
I'm super comfortable with it. I will say that, you know, when in 2016, when we were building this new facility, you know, we had big plans for growth, and we put in a bunch of 120 barrel tanks and a bunch of 90 barrel tanks, and we were absolutely certain that we were going to grow well through those. And I think you know, there was a voice in the back of my head that was saying, don't get too crazy. You know what I mean? Let's keep everything in check. I'm glad that I haven't, continued to add on to the brewery, not because like I would have, I'd love to see the brewery grow well beyond that, but I think that we're in a good spot right now. And the only thing I wish that I had were a few smaller tanks, honestly. You know what I mean? When did you ever hear a brewer say that like we all wanted to have 20,000 barrels of production or something like that? But honestly, we're right on the line of being a little bit big, but also being flexible, and so it's working for us now.
Good.
And we're making it work, right? So
yep. Yeah. From everything that I'm seeing, where I sit primarily on the finance side and the number side, the retail is the future. I've mentioned this a number of times in a lot of my writings and talking. So if you're a brewery and you happen to have a solid retail operation with or without food, you should be okay. You should be. I mean, there are some things that could hick you up and mess up the plan, but you should be okay. And where the real struggle now is with wholesale, with distribution, with making
I think
gains there.
when you came to Wisconsin and talked at the Wisconsin Brewers Guild and said, you should focus on 2 to 3 brands. I think everybody, at that time, it was a huge shocker. Of course, we'd been talking before that, so I was kind of prepared for that. But the reality is that, I don't think you're wrong. It's hard to, to keep up with Rotation Nation and be profitable. And we've definitely kind of went at it with like, okay, we're going to do limited releases, but we're going to make a good amount of money on those limited releases, and we're going to get in and get out and pre-sell them and do things like that made sense. But really, we're kind of looking at our core brands and making sure that they're the right brands for where the market's at. And we're kind of one of those weird breweries that our IPA, is our second bestseller. You know what I mean? So our focus has always been on cherry wheat, which is a style that probably isn't. It doesn't. You don't have to go head to head necessarily with every single brewery out there trying to make the best IPA in the world. So.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that ties interestingly into what you guys were discussing earlier in regards to how many options there are on the shelves for everything these days. And I think there's still this value to be had for focusing your portfolio on a couple core items and then maybe having 1 or 2 rotating things to keep something fresh. It's interesting that that's where the wisdom is, despite the huge push towards, all these options on the market.
Mm-hmm.
I think also that for us, one of the things that one of the lessons I learned from working with you guys is that we really needed to find something that was different, that we could go to market with, that wasn't something that was competing with everything out there. It's important for me to still be a beer, brewing beer, like it's in my blood. So we started pretty heavy into gluten-free beers, and I've had a number of family members that have celiac and things like that. So I recognized that market was kind of an important market, and so we've put some eggs in that basket. And they've bared fruit for us, because it's something that, when you look at the landscape and you say how many great, honestly, like great gluten-free beers are out there, I think most people's experience would tell you that there are none. And so we set out on a course to make a really great tasting gluten-free beer, and we found that there's some ramp there, some road in front of us on that, and so that's helped a lot too.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think the gluten-free market is one that is relatively untapped. I don't know the technical side of the brewing of it, but I think there's a huge market out there for it. And I wonder why more breweries don't do it. If it's hard to brew or what, you could speak to that maybe.
It's very expensive.
Okay.
It is very non-traditional in terms of mashing techniques and use of various enzymes and things like that. And it's something that, done well, you can make people extremely happy, right? Done poorly, it's just another whatever. Like, yeah, sure, it's gluten-free beer.
How much of a learning curve was there on producing?
A lot. I mean, it's a challenge, right? Like, I mean, there are like challenges, like, if you're brewing with millet, for example, the size of a millet seed is basically smaller than most people's wedge wire screens or whatever they're using in their lauter ton, they're smaller than the gap that is traditionally made, right? Like, so it took us a bit to be able to actually lauter efficiently, right? Like, and figure that whole thing out. But then there's also the other side of it where, you know, you can't introduce gluten anywhere in the process, right? Like, so, you know, you can't have it go through the same you know, mill or conveyance system for the rest of your grain. When you put it on tap, you know what I mean? It has to be, that line has to be absolutely clean of any potential, you know, gluten product. You know, these are things that we take like super seriously, and we do a lot of testing to make sure that we are, you know, below the threshold, or that no gluten is present, because it has consequences, right? And like, if you do cross contaminate, like, somebody might get sick, right? Like, and that would really suck, and it would be a bad situation. So I think that there are those kind of factors that keep people out of that realm. I think you see more breweries that are 100% gluten-free doing gluten-free beers than you do breweries that kind of mix the two, right? And but we know that when we do it, we have to be damn perfect and absolutely clean of any potential contaminants. So yeah, it's been a huge learning curve.
Yeah. Cool. All right, Bill, where can the listeners learn more about Hinterland Brewing and on the web, social? Like, tell us where we can learn more about you.
Yeah, so we are, obviously, our website is hinterlandbeer.com. On Instagram, it's our handle is Hinterland Beer. You know, we're out there on most social media, and yeah, I think those are probably the primary areas to find out of this. Of course, you know, if you happen to be anywhere in the state of Wisconsin or Chicago or Upper Michigan, we sell beer in those markets, and you can find us on store shelves there. So
awesome. I appreciate your time today, Bill. Wealth of knowledge. I want to have you back on soon, because I feel like we could talk for a long time. So appreciate it, and have a great day. Talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Bill.
Thanks for your time, Bill.
Bye.
You got it. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the True Craft Podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. And if you are just dying to know what Chris and I look like, you can head over to YouTube for a video recording of the show. Links to cool information about our guests and other fun facts can be found in the show notes. This podcast is sponsored by Small Batch Standard, the premier financial agency built to serve the craft brewing industry. We help craft breweries grow profits through outsourced accounting, tax compliance, and growth consulting. Visit sbstandard.com today to learn more and request a discovery call.